So today we're going to do age 42. I'm really excited about this because this is when the spiritual adulting process attempts to start. It's not really. We learned that it's 48 to 52, but this is when we sort of blow everything up in an attempt to spiritually adult. So this is sort of like why we build and castrate ourselves is to get to this point. So let me share my PowerPoint. You guys see that? So we're doing age 42. And I have a few things on this slide. Chaos, because this time of your life is represented by chaos. Uranus, and I'm going to give you some myths around Uranus. And I have Abraham, and Abraham is considered the father of Islam, Christianity, Judaism. And I'm going to tie that into 42. 42 begins the attempt at spiritual adulting. It's not, but it's the attempt at. It's an attempt to return to the cosmic womb. Prior to this, we were in toxic water theory, and we were attempting to go back to the maternal womb. But at 42, we have the aha that is not true. That isn't the true consciousness that we want. Again, very subconscious. Most people don't even know that this is what's happening. And they abandoned the toxic water theory attempt, and they tried to return to the cosmic womb. So I found this picture over here on the right, which looks like a fetus coming out of the sky in the heavens. So I thought that was interesting. And then I found this picture, and this is actually a real picture. These are a cluster of little like infant star babies. And I was finding some literature in the astronomy. They actually use words like star families. That's a very new age term, that we come from stardust, that we come from the cosmos, all that. And this is actually a cluster of, like, they use the word children or infants. I can't remember the exact name. And so it's programmed in our psyche, this idea of children, this even in the astronomical literature, not simply in spiritual literature or in our sort of day-to-day language. So it's really hard to unprogram this idea that we are a child of something or someone. And that's what I think people struggle with. So I thought this was really interesting from an astronomical standpoint, that this is actually a picture that they found this sort of cluster of these infant stars in the skies. And so this is what we're trying to get back to. This is a very different image than getting back into our mother's womb. Now we want to get back into the universal womb, the universal consciousness. We don't know how to get there, so we create chaos. Astrologically, we call it Uranus opposition, and it's the source of so many fights in the world, are these religious fights, which is kind of nonsensical if you think about it, and what you'll learn today, that all of this is the same thing. So we're going to do two universal laws today. One is principle of mentalism, and this is the all is mind. And one of the things that the Kabbalion says is all is in the all. And I've told you that this is a very difficult concept for people to kind of understand, because how can everything be everything? So it's difficult, but that's what the literature says. All is in the all. And other words for God are the one, the absolute, the great one, the creator, when we use in shamanism a lot, the supreme mind, that's also all is mind, the father, that's been sort of the patriarchy and this idea of father, or Abraham as the father of these religions, the universal mother, that's a pretty common concept in the Eastern philosophies, and the nameless. So what we start that this is what people at 42 are seeking. They're seeking the all, they're seeking the absolute. It's very common to hear people reach out to me at this time. They want to start developing their intuition, their guidance. What they're looking for is this concept. They no longer want to be limited by the constructs and the values that their earthly parents gave them. So here the Father and Universal Mother show up, and I'm going to tell you a little about mythology with that. The second law is the principle of rhythm. So I told you the other day about the 0, 14, and we got to 28, and today we're at 42. Now, if you see this, it's sort of like a zigzag, and then the next 14 years and the next 14 years, and it's actually going to look kind of like a ladder. And that's exactly what this is a spiritual adulting. We're kind of growing spiritually. So at 0, you're castrated because you're sort of kicked out of the cosmic consciousness or the universal womb. You get that castration, you're in the womb, and that's your first castration. You're built on a thought, one thought, and you build your life around the truth around that thought. At 14, you know, we have our first opposition, 14 to 16. You try to dethrone the values of your parents castrate you and say, nope, not happening in my house. At 28, we castrate ourselves. We do the exact same or the exact opposite as our parents. Again, it's related to the moment of conception and what we tried to dethrone at 14 to 16. And what happens at 42, so you see the law of rhythm, are these 0 to 100, these swings of the pendulum. At 42, we attempt to liberate ourselves from the castration we started here. So if you got married, you might cheat. And I'm going to give you some explanation as to why that's a common midlife crisis thing, is getting a mistress or a fast car. And it's all inherent in the story. We don't know we have a higher vibration or a higher consciousness level at which to do it. So here, when we castrated ourselves with a mortgage, a professional job, opened an organization, had a baby, here we want to blow it all up because this stage rules chaos. Chaos is the word of the universe. Going back to the all is all these words are simply words for chaos. And I told you in the outer circle of the squared circle last time that that's chaos, and we all come from that. So we try to blow up or create some sort of chaos, some people, you know, less than others, in the name of freedom. Freedom is mental. Freedom has nothing to do with money or a building or a mortgage. And I'm going to show you the three-headed dog Cerberus in a bit, which is really why we're not free and what the attempt at 42 is to do. So there's the universal law of mentalism, and now I want to give you some mythology. The first myth that I want to tell you about is Aletheia. Aletheia is the goddess of truth. This is the first time in our life we're actually trying to seek truth, universal truth. This is where our search begins. So we're at about midlife, according to astrology. We live to 84. So we're about midlife and we're seeking truth. Everything prior to now has been built on a thought, a castration, a social construct, a lie. And this is when we really attempt to remove that first veil. And since we're quote unquote adults, the search begins. The second myth we're going to talk about is Aquarius, that's known as the water bearer. And this is Zeus and Ganymede. Ganymede was a mortal, and he was the most beautiful mortal to ever live. And Zeus loved him so much that he made him the cupbearer, meaning he gave him the job of pour all of the drinks, the water, the wine, the amrit, anything that the gods were going to drink. His job was to serve the gods in a cup, and the cup you're going to see later has a lot of symbolism. Funny enough, the only person that Zeus did not sleep with was Ganymede. So Zeus, known for men, women, and animals, this was the only one he respected, and we'll talk about that in a moment. The other myth we're going to talk about is Abraham as the father of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, and over here I have that one of the terms for the all is the father. Hercules and the cattle of Geyron is another myth we're going to talk about that's also going to have to do with the cup and the receptacle. And then King Arthur and the Fisher King we're going to talk about. This image over here is Hercules. This arm has to do with Hercules and the cattle of Geyron, and these are the cattle. And he had to get the cattle, and in the process had to kill some aspects, and you'll see that in a moment. So let's start with 42. 42 is now the third round of 14. We know at 14 to 16, we're into our friends. We go to Sally's house for dinner. Her mom's potatoes are better than our mom's. Mom's having a fit that you're actually trying to learn about the world via the viewpoint and the rules of someone else's life. That is castrated. We are not allowed to do it. We're given a curfew. We have arguments, fights, and all of that. So we try to establish our own values at 14. Our parents castrate us and say no. At 28, we castrate ourselves on our parents' values, doing the exact same or opposite as they did. And at 42, in the name of freedom, intuition, raising vibration, these are words that people say, finding our purpose, we blow up our life. Now, again, not everybody blows up their life and cheats and gets divorced and quits their job, but there's a desire for, I often hear, I want to find my purpose, Francis. Well, your purpose is to first start with your value system and identify what your true values are. Our current life at 42 feels restricted, and this is when we begin a deeper search. So I have two images here that are super important. This is the glyph for the planet Uranus in astrology, and this is the glyph for the planet Mars. The word castrate is intentional because this is exactly what happens. When you are the universal consciousness, when you have no limitation and something limits you, whether it's a body, the womb, a value system, a philosophy of life, your financial status, you are castrated. This little ball here was the testicle, and I told you Saturn castrated Uranus, and that testicle dropped into the ocean. So this sky and blue background is intentional. When we get to 42, what we're trying to do is actually pick up the testicle from the ocean, see how it's the same circle, and reattach it. Mars is the planet of sex. Mars is the planet of free will or directed spirit and will, ego. And this is why we blow up our life at a low vibration, a low consciousness level in the name of I'm finding a lover, I get a mistress, I get a fast car. Mars rules fast cars. Because we don't have higher consciousness. Remember, at the moment of conception, it was a low consciousness that created you, and your job is to raise your consciousness. This is the attempt to begin that. But first you have to blow something up in order to begin that search. You have to create some chaos in order to have permission to find that. And so this Mars glyph is the ego, the penis, the masculine principle that we attempt to reattach. And that's why it is called sexual liberation. Women will tell you that they feel liberated around 42. Men start wearing Speedos and get fast cars and have a midlife crisis and find themselves a mistress or a young girl. It's not accidental. These energies are dictating that behavior. What we want to do is we want to find a way to live it out in a healthy, high vibration way. So becoming uncastrated literally is taking that testicle. The circle I told you means spirit. In a moment, you're going to see that this is the beginning of the spiritual adulting process ruled by the circle, which is spiritual. So we try to remove the testicle, put it right back. We have a midlife crisis. We might cheat, buy inexpensive cars or anything Mars or penetrator related. There's something we must penetrate. We have a midlife crisis. We argue, we fight. We get something fast that penetrates the traffic jam. We get a girlfriend that we penetrate. That's a very important word because here again, we're valuing the masculine principle. And I've told you that that's part of the problem we have in society. And when I gave you the British monarchy lecture, and when I told you about the Amazons, it's a balance between the masculine and the feminine, but it's the masculine that's valued in society. So after you blow up your life, whatever that means for you, creating a conflict, your wife cheating on you, you cheating on your wife, because remember, it goes both ways, buying the fast car, getting into an accident, God forbid, losing a child, whatever you created to blow up your life, you now have permission to seek spirituality. Because something so dire happened that you created, or you're the victim, which you created anyway, then now you have permission. This is what we need to stop. We have to stop with the nonsense of creating illness, of creating conflict, of creating problems in our life, and just know that we are spiritual beings and we have permission to understand who we are. We don't have to create the problematic life that we're living in order to seek God or seek the all. So we create chaos, blame one another in order to find our own values, because our parents obviously never gave us permission. Society doesn't give us permission. We have to blow it up so that we have permission according to society and the family in order to seek our own values. So there's, in the Greek system, there was something called paiderastia, and this was adult men having sex with adolescent males. It's very documented that most cultures have homosexuality, and this goes both ways. There's a name for it. It's a custom. Oftentimes, and I see this in practice quite a bit, people start experimenting sexually. They realize that maybe they have suppressed homosexual tendencies or bisexual tendencies. It is not uncommon at this age that people blow up their life and then go off with the opposite sex, or they honor their real sexuality that is no longer confined to social norms. Your generation is a little less of that because the generation per se is more accepting, but older generations, this is a very common time where this is happening. And in the myth, Zeus, I told you Ganymede was the only mortal he didn't have sex with. He actually respected Ganymede, and he put him in the heavens actually as the water bearer, which is the constellation of Aquarius, the age of Aquarius, and we'll talk about that a little bit. So I told you the other day, the triangle, the square, and the circle. Here is our physical child. Here's our physical adult. We've now castrated ourselves with a mortgage, a child, a marriage, a full-time job. And now spiritual adulting begins. Let me just specify, begins. We are nowhere near anywhere of becoming spiritual adults. This is like the beginning. And first we go through the nonsense of blowing up our life and getting permission from society. So we're still in that castration process, but we're attempting to know ourselves a little better. So this is Cerberus. Cerberus is a three-headed dog. You're going to hear me talk about Cerberus quite a bit next month when we do forensics. So I just want to introduce him here. Hades, who's the god of the underworld, has a three-headed dog named Cerberus. And Cerberus guards the underworld so that no one can leave. The underworld is another word for hell. Hell exists here. Heaven exists here. Hell is created by three things: your thoughts, your emotions, and your desires, none of which are mostly tangible. They live in your psyche. They create the nonsense of your life. They keep you in child and teenager. They keep you a spiritual child. And notice all the way here, even up to 42, you're still a spiritual child, because these three aspects dictate your life. In my 12 truths, the first truth is the truth of thought. You must know what your impure thoughts are. The second is the truth of desire. You must know what your bodily desires are and honor those part of the time. And third is the truth of breath, which is the emotional sort of situations that you create in hopes that someone will meet your needs. And this is directly related to a Uranus, and why at 42 this process begins. Father Sky, I mentioned, was one of the names that people call the All. Father Sky is Uranus, and what he would do is that he would have children with Mother Earth, Gaia. And every time she had a baby, he would shove and shove and shove the baby into the earth. And she was just overfilled with children. That is what you do with your emotions. That is what you do with your thoughts. That is what you do with your desires that are not socially acceptable. Up until this point, you are living on societal norms. You are living on your parental values. You have no clue who you are. You have no clue what your values are. And you have no clue how you're going to become a spiritual adult. But this process is the attempt at that. And so Mother Earth vomits all of the children. When you blow up your life in an attempt to honor your emotions, finally feel what you're allowed to feel, think and say what you're allowed to think and say, because you created such a chaos and nonsense in your life. Now, because of that situation, let's say someone cheated on you and you got divorced, in the name of that, acting as the victim, you now have permission to cry, to honor your self's desires, to now start dating and get on Tinder and all that nonsense. Okay, this is simply because we still want to honor societal norms within the guise of honoring our thoughts, our emotions, and our material desires. That's what's behind the blowing up of this point in our life. So here's my spiritual adult map, and here, this is still adult. I told you the other day, most people stay here. They live with restriction and they try to achieve freedom. They try to run away from their life. They go on vacation. They spend money on clothes and cars they can't afford. And this is where most people stay. The limitation of their thoughts, the restrictions, they can't say anything. And then over here, they have some really unhealthy, poor coping style. When the spiritual adulting process begins, it begins here at Uranus. Okay. Next is Neptune, and this is important. Please look at this glyph because we're going to talk about it. It's a receptacle. And this one also looks like a receptacle, like a little vase. These two are next. A lot of people just get to Neptune and they stay there. Neptune at a low consciousness level is spirituality or religion or some new philosophy, but notice we still have Pluto, Chiron, and Black Moon until we really fully become a spiritual adult. So if we're lucky enough to blow up our life and actually learn and seek some sort of spirituality and some higher knowledge of self, a lot of people end up here in Neptune. It's good, but it's not the full process. That's when people seek intuition or a psychic or some sort of spiritual path, but they stay here. This is also, if you remember, the archetype for the victim, where we're not necessarily owning that we created over here this chaos. We stay in victim. That's at a low level consciousness. And seeking some sort of spirituality may be the next step, but again, it's not the full step. So this is Ganymede. He's absolutely beautiful. He's placed in the heavens as the water bearer. And I told you that Zeus had him on Mount Olympus, and he would serve all of the drinks, the wine and such to the gods. Uranus, the planet Uranus, which is the one that rules 42, rules Aquarius, the sign in the zodiac, and it means the water bearer. We are now in the age of Aquarius. There is no longer the age of Pisces, which was the world's savior. Jesus came to save us. No one is saving. You're nurturing others, they're nurturing you. The concept of namaste. I see your light, you see my light. That's at a universal global level. We have many, many years to see any of that happen. Now notice what he's wearing. This is the symbol of Aquarius. It looks like it's water. It's actually an air sign. These are the air waves. This happens at the universal consciousness, the element of air and the element of ether. Okay, water is second chakra. Protection needs child. So I know it's a little ironic that he's the water bearer, nurturing all, but he's actually ruling the fourth chakra, and why the symbol's at his fourth chakra, which is air. This is only time, once we've met self-love in the third chakra, then we can love the other and nurture others. At unconditional love, agape love at the fourth. We cannot do it prior to this. If you stay stuck in victim, that someone did something to you, that someone cheated, that someone broke into your car, someone fired you, then you're not even at the third chakra of self-love because you're still in victim. You're stuck at the second chakra of protection needs, which is the water element. So the symbolism here might be a little confusing, but that's what it means. The thing is, at this age, we no longer want the toxic waters. We no longer are seeking the symbiosis of mother and the womb. Now we want the universal mother, or the sky father, that is the cosmic consciousness. And this is midpoint to death. 84 astrologically, of course, you can live to however old you want, or as young as you want, but midpoint to death symbolically is 84. So the first half of our life intentionally was being built a material adult, material infrastructure, money, a bank account, children, a family, fine. But now the second part of our life is about the universal consciousness, finding our spiritual parents, which is ourself, ironically, since we're children of no one. So we want the universal waters, which is what he represents, and the cosmic womb, which is what he represents. Zeus could not keep him in Mount Olympus. He had to put him in the stars, and I'll explain why. So Ganymede is brought to Olympus to pour the waters or the wine for all the gods. The thing is that every time Ganymede pours the drink for the gods, he cries. He's in grief. He sees his father down on earth, and he longs for his father. This is a twofold process. When we start our spiritual journey, when we realize we have created the nonsense of our life, when we realize and take ownership that everything that has happened to us, we did, whether it's karmic law, at the moment of conception, we picked that snow globe, that story, and then we perpetuated that by building a life on lies, we should go through a grief process. Hopefully it's not illness related. Hopefully it's just a safe space with your emotions that we'll talk about more in a minute. But we should go through a grief, recognizing the life that we lived. The other thing is he has grief because he longs for his father's land. The land is on earth. He is now in the heavens on Olympus, and he wants to go back home. This is what happens with us. When we're in the cosmic consciousness, when we're out of the body, we, like Ganymede, look down on the earth and say, I want to go back to that. And then we do the cycle again, and we get castrated. We're in the womb, on an origin story, etc., etc. And this is the cycle of death and rebirth. Jesus' story was an opportunity to stop that, to balance the spirit and the matter, to balance the thought, the desires, the emotions, become a spiritual adult, and then no longer long for the earthly world. But if we have karma, we have no choice but to long for the earthly world, and we keep coming back. If we do not honor our thoughts, our impure thoughts, own our emotions, and have emotional restraint and control, and understand our desires, we're gonna keep coming back to the earthly home. Those are the first three truths on the spiritual path. And we see this repeatedly in literature: restraint of thought, restraint of emotion, restraint of speech, but we haven't been explained exactly what that means. So when we're at this level of grief and we don't own it, and we just stay sad and in victim, we're actually living out our poor coping skill that we got during pregnancy, and we keep honoring the emotions, and we have no choice but to stay spiritual children, and we cannot grow into spiritual adults, therefore we just keep coming back. So the next steps are here. Pluto is the grief or the death or illness or some sort of catastrophe. Hopefully it's minor and you don't make a nonsense like I did. And here is the victim archetype after we blow up our life, or so supposedly someone blew it up for us because they cheated or fired us. We stay in victim, or we start seeking a spiritual path. Again, this is still not fully the spiritual adult. That doesn't even start at 48 to 52. Of course, like I said, we could speed it up, but this is where most people stay. So at 49, we have another Valor year, which is after this. But if we stay in low-level consciousness, all we do is we come back to Earth, or we continue our entire life the same it was. We get remarried, we get another job. We never really stop to look at our values that we're supposed to do at a Valor year. So you can actually blow up your life at 42, create chaos, and then go right back all the way down here. There's nowhere that it is said, this is free will. There is nowhere it's said that you're going to continue to the next steps. At 56, you have an end year, another neutralizer, another nemesis that tries to balance you from 0 to 100. Okay, so these are the next steps if you understand 42. If you don't understand 42 and why you did all the chaos and nonsense, basically the rest is wasted. You might get a little growth, but basically you're going to just stay in this restraint, freedom, castration, liberty, seeking the rest of your life. So at this point, Ganymede, understanding this, was placed in the heavens. He stayed in the cosmic consciousness. He stayed in the constellation and became Aquarius. And if we actually begun the spiritual adulting process and understand, then that's when we start seeking not intuition and not psychics and all the low-level consciousness, but we actually return to understanding universal laws, and we start preparing, because it's the midlife, we start preparing for our return home. The age of Aquarius and the sign of Aquarius and Uranus is all about loving others and self. So I can nurture others, give others to drink, and not be thirsty. Remember, I told you, you have self or selfish. There's no selfless. Self, your needs are met, and the other's needs are met. Selfish is your needs are not met, and the other person's needs are not met. This is the age where we actually start understanding self-love, if we get there. And we start understanding that we've created the nonsense, and now we can love ourselves, meet our needs, and by meeting our needs, we're allowing and mirroring and modeling, like the water bearer getting someone else to drink, because now we're drinking. So the Holy Grail. The Holy Grail is something that you're going to see a lot of in mythology and in literature. And it's usually an elusive object or goal that's sought after for its great significance. Now, this is a picture of the Holy Grail. It's a chalice. And notice here, this is the Holy Grail. This is the chalice. This is Pisces. This is spiritual union, you with the universe. This is what we're trying to achieve. This is why Jesus brought in the era of Pisces, and he was considered a fisher of men. The fish is a symbol of Christianity. The fish is a symbol of Pisces, and it's with the Holy Grail. So the first time we see this is Jesus's cup at the Last Supper. Why Catholics drink the blood in the Eucharist on Sundays. In King Arthur tales and the Knights of the Round Table, they were supposed to go find this Holy Grail. This was the goal. And it was kept in a mysterious castle surrounded by a wasteland and guarded by the Fisher King, who suffered from a wound that would not heal. This is extremely symbolic. We have a castle, our spirit, in our body. Our body is the wasteland, but it's not only our body, it's our thoughts, it's our emotions, and our body desires. It's the story of Jesus, it's the story of Buddha. You have a body that needs sex and bathroom and food and sleep, which is considered a wasteland, and that's how we judge our bodies. Step 6 on a spiritual path is the truth of purification, where we should eat well and sleep well and exercise well, not obsessively. You're obsessing about your body and your food and your diet and your exercise, then you're just at the thoughts. You're at the first step and you've yet to get to the purification process. But we do need to be a little conscientious about what we eat, try to put healthy foods, nourish the vehicle in which the spiritual is housed. The castle is the spirit. So you hear me talk about the throne, the kingdom. That's the spirit. Carolyn Mace talks about it. St. Teresa of Avila talks about it. This is a metaphor you're going to see over and over. Castles are related to the spirit, to the kingdom you have inside. The wasteland, oftentimes represented by snakes and serpents, is the body, the thoughts, and the emotions. And this goes back to Cerberus, the three-headed dog. He guards the underworld. Your underworld, your hell, is created on this earth by your body, your thoughts, and your emotions. Until you break that down, which at the point of 42 is to start having this knowledge, then you can start your spiritual adulting. But if you never confront these three, then you're going to stay there, and most people do. The Fisher King, you, your self-love, you as a balanced individual, spirit and matter, not spirit more than matter or matter more than spirit, will be the one that guards the spirit and the body. And notice that he suffers from a wound that cannot heal. When we did the 48 to 52, I told you about Chiron, and Chiron had a wound that couldn't heal. This is a repeated theme, the wounded healer. Don't go to someone who's a wounded healer who can never heal themselves. That means they're not applying their own teaching and their own medicine. But it is true that none of us are going to heal the wound at conception. None of us will ever be whole in an earthly body. The attempt is to achieve self-love through the wound, to love ourselves despite being unlovable, worthless, ugly, whatever your judgments are. That's the wound that will not heal. You're going to see this theme in mythology and literature over and over. And the symbolism of the cup of the Holy Grail is a receptacle. The receptacle is the feminine. It is the antithesis to the masculine. So I'll take you back again to here. We're trying to bring back the testicle through the masculine, making more money, having sex, buying a fast car. We are never going to return to the cosmic consciousness through the masculine principle. The masculine principle is divine will, which is necessary, but it is not the answer. The answer is the feminine. Venus, let me bring you back to that glyph over here, the circle of spirit over the cross of matter, balancing our earthly with our spiritual, which was Jesus and Buddha and the East and the West and everything that I've told you. But if you remember from 21 and 24 lecture, what happens here? We get our image, we get our beauty, we get our sex, we get our money, we get our gluttony. However, this here, if we actually did it correctly, if we actually listened to that first neutralizer, if we actually looked at our values, this is the foundation really of our spiritual life, because Jupiter is our spiritual path and Venus is how we get it here now on Earth. This is Mother Earth. But we're so stuck in the masculine and the ego and the will that we don't balance the masculine and the feminine energies. So this attempt at the Holy Grail is to find God here on Earth. Be here now. Famous book by a wonderful spiritual teacher who died a couple years ago named Ram Dass, wrote a very famous book. Be here now. Remember I told you that Mercury is intellect and the rational mind. And Mercury has winged sandals going to the upper world and the underworld, the upper world and the underworld, and never stops here. This is the first lie. This is when your parents say, go get academic achievement or go get whatever validation you need from them. The lie has to be unveiled all the way over here. This is just the first step. So in order for us to actually achieve the Holy Grail and find God or the all or the universe in this world, be here now, it is through the feminine. And I don't mean sex, and I don't mean image, and I don't mean Sephora, and I don't mean beauty. I mean the graces, I mean the muses, finding a way to love and accept yourself independent of those things that you don't validate. Your thoughts impure, your emotions that you hoard, what you feel to stay in child, and your earthly desires. That is the only way to, and we don't heal, but it's the only way to balance it. And so the Grail is this cup that holds, and you're going to see in the next myth, that we need a receptacle. We need Gaia, we need Mother Earth to hold the emotions, to hold the pain, to hold the suffering, so that we can do the work. This is often where you guys are going to come into a client's life. You are going to hold the space for the client for them to do the work. However, you cannot just be empathy and compassion and hold the space. You also have to nudge them to look at the truth and the spiritual consciousness. If you just hold the space, then you just listen and that's it, which is fine. Some people do that. I'm trying to get you guys to do both hard edges and soft corners. So this is definitely the soft corner, the receptacle where people feel safe and trusting to share their feelings and their intimate thoughts with you. But first you have to do that with yourself. You have to be the receptacle for yourself, where you hold your true thoughts, your true desires, and your true emotions for yourself. That's being the adult. And that's the Hieros Gamos. You guys know that in The Truth and in the Triangle, it's a relationship book, but it's all about the Hieros Gamos, the mystical marriage to self. The mystical marriage to self is loving self, the good, the bad, and the ugly, so the good buckets and the bad buckets. Despite that, you're still lovable. Despite never being met your needs or loved unconditional by your parents, that you become that for yourself. Then and only then can you have a real adult relationship. So in The Truth is in the Triangle, I teach you how to achieve the Hieros Gamos with self. And how is that? Meeting your own needs, having non-negotiables, a rule book, a philosophy of life that you hold yourself and of course your partner to. And if you break those rules, you call yourself on it. And if your partner violates it, then you have a consequence. And we don't want to do this adulting process. That's why I was making fun of the Lady Gaga song the other day. 10,000 reasons to leave, give me one to stay. We don't want to constantly see that we self-betray over and over and over. We're not authentic with ourselves. We don't own our thoughts, our desires, and our emotions. And yet we want to be trusted with, sort of the goals and the gifts of the universe. That's why it's an object or a goal. This is actually an internal goal, which is to achieve the Hieros Gamos, the mystical marriage. So there is a myth of Hercules of the cattle of Gairon. I had shown you the picture earlier. Hercules is told to collect, not kill, to collect the cattle of Gairon. Cattle always represents the bull, the cow, the desires. So in this case, it's the desires, it's the thoughts, and the emotions. That's the three-headed dog. Those are the three things that keep us in the underworld, in a hellish world, in a hellish life, and don't allow us to become adults, much less spiritual adults. So he is told to collect the cattle, and what he does is he puts them all inside of the receptacle. He puts them inside an actual chalice. And so I mentioned before, the Christians drink from the chalice the blood of Christ. It's the receptacle or the Mother Earth that holds our pain. It's the feminine principle of compassion and empathy and forgiveness that holds us. That's what we need to be for others, but first for ourselves. Be your own receptacle. Be this chalice, this Holy Grail for self, and hold the pleasures of your flesh, your desires, your emotions, your impure thoughts. When you can balance that inside here, then you achieve the Heros, the mystical marriage, self-love, the third chakra. Then and only then can you actually be something for someone else and enter the age of Aquarius. So we have a long way to go before we can be on the 11th truth, which is the truth of service. People want to serve before ever really realizing why they're serving, what greed or privilege or negative word they're judging in themselves, and it's not altruistic. It can only be from the heart, like Ganymedes right here, the air element, the agape love, when the thought is clear, when the thought is pure, when the thought is about serving the universal consciousness, not myself. And if you have impure thoughts and haven't looked at them, impure emotions, haven't looked at why you're showing up as child, and impure bodily desires and don't own them, then you can never really be the water bearer. You cannot be a healer to others because you haven't healed yourself. No Heros, no healthy relationships. So lastly, the covenant of Abraham with God. I don't know how much you guys know about the Abrahamic religions, but in my reading, I read that there really isn't any account that Abraham actually was a real person, that he actually existed. So basically, Abraham was promised by God that he was going to have a son. He was like 100 years old. And he was told that he was going to be a father of nations. Again, the all is one, the universe, one of the many names it goes after is the Father. So Abraham was told, after he finally has a son, he's 100 years old, to go and kill his son, Isaac. He's like, God wants you to sacrifice. The angel comes and says, you have to kill your son. And Abraham is so loyal and he's so in debt to God, and this is our psyche, that we kill or sacrifice our only son, our children, our money, our life, our marriage, our health, whatever it is, in the name of this sacrifice to God. Well, luckily the story goes, God said, no, don't do it. You proved your loyalty, and lucky Isaac got to live. But what this did in our psyche is that if we are going to have growth, if we are going to know God, if we are going to get to communion with the universal consciousness, we better pay up. And you pay your parents as a sacrifice. I've told you about the offering versus sacrifice. This comes from this. This is programmed in our psyche. Run to the Eastern religions. It doesn't matter. This is the Western philosophy. It's in your psyche. So we think, and if we're going to blow up our life, that's part of the offering or the sacrifice. If we get sick, well, then I got sick as the offering or the sacrifice in order to find myself, to do my inner work, to love myself, and dethrone my parents. And this is really psychotic because it's really programmed. And we have to get very clear on the fact that we are doing some big sacrifices in the name of our parents, dead or alive, friendly or not friendly, every time we attempt to get closer to the universal womb, the universal consciousness. And the other thing is that this idea is that Abraham had a covenant with God. We have a covenant with our parents. If we do something for them, like own our values, own their value system, have children so they could be grandparents, become the doctor to continue the lineage and the family business, whatever it is, that the parents or God, which are your gods, are going to take care of you. This keeps us, first of all, in child, but more importantly, it keeps us as if it's not now, as if the payment is coming later. And so this idea of suffer now, get rewarded later in an afterlife comes from this. Be here now, the feminine, the earthly, present, not Mercury going to the upper world and the lower world, but rather enjoying here now. Yes, there's pain in this earth, but there's also a lot of beautiful things if we're actually present in the moment. This is the point of mindfulness. So when God asks Abraham to do certain things, in return, Abraham's going to be taken care of. So our Western religions are rooted in this idea of sacrifice and do it for me now, I'll take care of you later. And so we have religious wars, we have people blowing themselves up all in the name of some promise of an afterlife, and no one's here now. And then we wonder why there's so much illness and there's so much chaos. So we really need to reevaluate this idea of becoming spiritual adults and why people don't like it. And that's why I was sort of like flabbergasted when I saw the language that even astronomers are using for these clusters in the sky. We're not children of anyone. We are the same as that cosmic consciousness. We are the same energy as the universe, as the stardust. We are from that. So this idea of children is very difficult to dethrone, because then who am I? Which is really what comes all the way here in Lilith, which is the last stage of spiritual adulting, where she removes the final veil and says, God, I am you, you are me, no more submission, no more hierarchy. We are equal. That's the idea of we are one. All is mind. So that's what the whole purpose of Age of Aquarius is. And the other thing is that there's no more sacrifices, that we don't have to sacrifice not having children or religious wars or death or illness or financial ruin or whatever it is, that, mistreatment to our bodies in the form of eating disorders for our mother, all of the nonsense that we've created because we have to pay a very big price in order to have spiritual freedom, in order to have the Holy Grail. The Holy Grail is here now. It's the union of your spirit and your matter. It's the marriage to self. Then we can build healthy relationships, friendships, families. But if we have this idea that we're still a child and our needs in any way are going to be met by others, then we really castrate ourselves over and over and over again, and we don't achieve the universal consciousness, which is the point of age 42. So this is simply the beginning of the spiritual adulting process. It is by no means anywhere near all the way over here in Lilith, but it's the start. And it really is identified. You are going to get clients at this age because it's chaos. We come from chaos. We're trying to return to chaos in our psyche, the womb, but we don't know how, and we do very low level vibration things to ourselves and our families in order to have permission to seek God. I'm going to stop sharing and take your questions. Any questions? I'm going to stop recording.